Hi there. I never thought I would make a video about the tools I use to build models, because I didn't think I had much to add to the myriads of content that's out there already. But so many of you reached out to ask questions about some of the tools seen in the previous episodes that I decided to make one anyway. I'm hoping that this one will be useful to some of you, especially if you're starting out just now or returning to the hobby after a longer period of time. Who knows, maybe this format will turn into its own series. Anyway, welcome to the shop. This episode focuses on the tools and some of the materials I use in the building process. If you're new to modeling, don't be alarmed, what you can see on the screen right now is pretty much all you will need for your first couple of builds. However, if the hobby sticks, you will inevitably accumulate a bunch of crap over time, some of which you will regret buying. Remember, this is a completely arbitrary inventory of the items I found useful, and it's not at all meant to be a definitive list of sorts. I have no affiliation with any of the manufacturers, so whatever I say in this video is based on my own experience with the products, which in some cases is not a lot. With that being said, just in case you would like to look something up, I included the details of every item in the description. We have lots of ground to cover, so I organized everything into groups. You can use the chapters to jump back and forth in the video if you so wish. The first chapter covers tools to pick up, hold, move around and place parts. Chapter 2 includes everything related to cutting, snipping, sewing, trimming, etc. The third chapter drills down into, well, drilling. Chapter 4 covers abrasives of various grades for every application from shaping to polishing. In the fifth chapter we look at various types of glues. Chapter 6 is about fillers, more precisely what I use instead of fillers and putty. Chapter 7 is all about making measurements and marking. In Chapter 8, we look at tools designed for surface details, specifically scribing and riveting. Chapter 9 covers the punches and dies I use to make tiny discs and hexagons. The last chapter is about folding, bending and rolling wires and metal sheets. So let's dive right in. I used these pointy tweezers for almost a decade. They have a good, precise tip and they are perfect for almost every application. Where they get clumsy is working with magnetic metals. I did try to make use of this property in the past, but it's just too strong and tends to pull parts away from where they're supposed to go, which is exactly where non-magnetic tweezers excel. These particular ones are sold by Trumpeter/Master Tools in a set of 4, but you can also find the same set online sold by other brands or as generic unbranded products. Nowadays I'm using the pointy and the blunt ones 99% of the time. Reverse grip or cross-locking tweezers are useful to hold parts for extended periods of time. If you put them down, they can act as a third hand, leaving your actual hands free to manipulate the detail. The smaller ones are soldering tweezers from Heiko Wild. Clamps are useful to squeeze flat parts together so you don't have to hold them while the cement dries. They can also be used as a third hand just like cross-locking tweezers. Where they are absolutely useless is with cylindrical and round objects, which they tend to slip right off of. There is a workaround though I saw on the Scale Models channel, which I will add the link to in the description. Luckily, both masking tape and rubber bands can handle these types of situations quite well. To pick up and position small, lightweight parts, I mostly use Vallejo's pick and place tool. As for even smaller details, nothing beats moistened toothpicks. Blu Tack and similar reusable adhesive putties are very handy when it comes to attaching smaller details to handles. Despite the official recommendation, if Blu Tack forms residue on unpainted parts, there is no need for any chemicals or heat to get it off. Just take a larger piece of Blu Tack and roll it around to collect the residue. For a similar kind of handle, you can stick a piece of masking tape onto a popsicle stick or plastic board, fold it back onto itself and wrap it around backwards. This works equally well if not better. Meng's bending pliers for photo-etched parts, or frankly any flat-nose pliers with precise jaws, are perfect to move around and manipulate flat parts as well as thin metal sheets. Where they fall short is again holding cylindrical objects firmly, which is why I also like to keep a pair of combination pliers with grooved jaws around. While in general I like Tamiya a lot, their long nose pliers didn't quite live up to my expectations. The handles are way too wobbly, which means that the jaws are never perfectly aligned when closed. Not sure if it's only mine that does this, but the wobbliness made me mad every time I used to touch this pair of pliers. Despite it being seemingly the most obvious tool in this chapter, I use scissors very occasionally, only to cut up the thinnest plastic and metal sheets into smaller pieces. Up above, you can see a number 11 surgical scalpel blade, which is my go-to cutting tool to the extent that I only use regular hobby knives for more heavy-duty applications. Whichever blade you choose, you will always need something to cut on. Self-healing cutting mats are the single best option for most uses. They usually consist of multiple layers sandwiched together. The middle one tends to be very sensitive to heat, so don't leave it out in the sun or put your laptop on it, otherwise it will become wavy and will be completely ruined in just a few minutes. Up above is a number 15 small curved surgical scalpel blade, which I use mostly on photo-etched parts to scrape away excess plastic and to apply superglue. Down below is a chisel blade, which you may already suspect what I use for. I find that CDs and DVDs provide more solid foundation than cutting mats when working with brass, copper or aluminum sheets, but discs are still soft enough not to dull blades as fast as glass or tiles would. Side cutters or nippers like this one from the brand Fine Art are best to separate parts from sprues. They are inexpensive, and if you only use them on plastic, they can last forever. To clean up sprue knobs from parts, it's good to have something more precise at hand, like these single-edged side cutters from Meng. To be fair, hobby knives can also get you quite decent results, and some light sanding is inevitable in both cases. But still, just take a look at how much cleaner cut the single-edged tool leaves. In my eternal wisdom, I used to cut hard steel wires and guitar strings with my nippers for plastic, and it didn't take long before I completely destroyed the blades. If you work with a lot of hard wire like I do, get purpose-built cutters like this one from Xuron. These things cut hard wires effortlessly. I also like to use Proxon's cutting discs. These can be attached to pretty much any rotary tool capable of low RPM. The one I have also happens to be a Proxon, and it's called Micromud 50E. Not only do these discs cut metal tubes while still retaining a circular cross-section, but they can also sharpen and clean up jagged edges. You can mount short sections of tubes that would otherwise be difficult to hold in a toothpick and just grind the excess away. It's a good idea to wear protection during and clean up the bench after grinding. I'm no doctor, but I don't think steel particles in our lungs or digestive systems are good for us. Many companies sell razor saws. These particular ones are from JLC and CMK. The most important characteristics here are teeth density and the thinness of the blade. The farther apart the teeth are, the faster and less precise the cut will be. This rapid cut saw blade from RB Productions is a pretty thick and aggressive one, which is useful when precision is not a must. These oddly shaped photo-etched nano saws from Heuler and RB are real game changers for working hard to reach areas. Many of these blades are also thin enough to separate control surfaces. Okay, not my best work here, but you get the idea. Mr. Hobby's large modeling so combines speed and finesse. Although it doesn't fit everywhere, it produces very thin cuts and is by far the fastest to work with. This demo is just to give you an idea of the cuts you can get from each of these tools in a comparable time frame. In order to get perfectly straight edges when chopping styrene strips, I often use single-edge razor blades. Miter boxes, like this one from JLC, are good to get the angles right too, but this box is limited to 30, 45, 60 and 90 degree cuts. A more sophisticated solution is the RP Cutter tool, which offers a lot more flexibility in terms of both angle and length. I like to use it whenever I need multiple identical pieces of styrene strips. Olfa's Compass Circle Cutter is exactly what it says in the name, and it's ideal for larger circles. I don't use it too often, which explains why I'm so clumsy with it. This one can be used on paper, masking tape, as well as on thinner plastic sheets. For smaller circles, I use this one from Meng. It's a bit more on the expensive side, but it can produce circles of any diameter less than 25mm. It comes with a set of 3 of these tiny blades held in place by a magnet. And there's also a spring in there to allow for the pressure applied onto the material to be adjusted by twisting a knob. Now that the circle is complete, it's time to move on. I use 2 kinds of drill bits. Both types can be used in pin vices as well as in rotary tools. These ones are made of high-speed steel, and they are being sold online mostly as unbranded items by the piece as well as in sets. Before I begin to drill, I always poke a tiny divot with a needle to mark the exact point where I want the hole to go. This will guide the bit and prevent it from jumping around. Tungsten carbide drill bits are somewhat sharper, but they are also a bit more rigid and tend to break more easily, especially the thinner ones. On the upside though, some of these come as thin as 0.1mm in diameter. Hypodermic needles also work quite well on styrene, and unlike actual drill bits, they don't tend to break and end up getting stuck in the material. In this chapter, the most obvious tools are wet and dry sandpapers, which I like to maintain a reasonable assortment of. I cut them up into tiny squares, which I can then fold or roll depending on the type of surface I need. For the most part though, I use sanding pads and sticks. I like these green ones from Vallejo, which I can cut into smaller pieces if needed. I also have this set of sticks from Ammo ranging from 180 to 1200 grit. For lighter sanding and polishing, I like to use these soft red and yellow pads, which I couldn't for the life of me find out the manufacturer of. Glass fiber pencils are excellent for rough sanding in hard to reach areas, and so are number 15 blades for scraping. Jewelers' files are usually sold in sets, containing at least a dozen different profiles. Looking back, I think I only ever used the 3 you can see on the left hand side. These plastic sanding needles from Albion Alloys are great for turning hard-to-reach joints into seamless air intakes. When it comes to removing excess material, milling bits can often save a lot of time. I think round-headed ones are the best for what we do. The lowest RPM and constant movement are very important here. Regardless of whether I grind, mill, file or sand, an old toothbrush always helps clean the dust off the workpiece. Polishing pads and cloths are both great to give styrene parts a shiny finish. The former are from Mr. Hobby, while the latter are micromesh products. I like to use this vat to avoid clogging them up and go step by step from 3200 all the way up to 12,000 grit. Clear parts often need even further refinement to have their transparency restored, which is when I apply Tamiya polishing compounds in the order the labels suggest at the lowest possible RPM. Let's start with Tamiya Super Thin Cement. There are 2 kinds and I use both for different types of applications. This regular one is more aggressive, it melts plastic more and it also takes longer to dry. By the way, Tamiya airbrush cleaner is much cheaper and it has the same liquid in there. The light green cap quick setting type evaporates much faster and leaves even less residue than the original one. It's kind of difficult to see, but a piece of plastic on the right looks slightly thicker as regular thin cement melted it more into the surrounding area. I think these glasses with their built-in applicators are brilliant, but I keep spilling cement by knocking them over. Which is why I wish I didn't wait 10 years to buy these cheap foam pads for like €1 a piece. See, that's money well spent right there. I also have Tamiya's regular cement, but I think I use it only a handful of times. It's much thicker than the other 2, it dries slower and it retains some of its volume even after drying. If you're starting out just now and looking to buy only one type of cement, I recommend to pick the one with the dark green cap. I struggled for years with superglues that weren't strong enough and dried brittle. Then I found out about AK's Black Widow, which is an ultra-resistant adhesive with more elasticity than regular CA thanks to the rubber particles it contains. Sadly, to my knowledge, AK no longer make these, but there are similar products out there that work equally well, like the Black CA from Bolt. Another game changer for me was when I learned about superglue accelerators and debonders that don't harm styrene. I like to pour these over into empty Tamiya cement bottles so I can apply them more precisely with those built-in applicator brushes. Be careful though and always test before use. I did come across some short-run kits that even these milder chemicals could melt the plastic off. Now let me put some accelerator on that one tiny drop of superglue. As you can see, it dried instantly, while the other drops can still be spread out. There are tools designed for this, but I find that curved blades allow good enough control for superglue application. And here is me cleaning up a superglue stain with some debonder. When I first found out about this, I felt as though the undo command had become available in real life. There are 2 other types of CA I use occasionally. This gel type one is from Loctite, but other brands also have similar products. These are typically a lot thicker than regular superglue, and they allow a bit more time to adjust parts before they set. Extra thin CAs like this one can make use of the capillary action and seep into the tightest joints and cracks. And last but not least, my new favorite, Ammo's Ultra Glue, which is a water-soluble acrylic adhesive that forms much stronger bonds than regular white glue. I always use black superglue to fill smaller gaps and seams. Yes, that's right, I barely ever use actual fillers. They're messy, they shrink, and crack like dry biscuits when you try to add panel lines or rivet detail. The other reason I prefer superglue is that I use isopropyl alcohol to clean my models before priming, and IPA dissolves most filler putties, but it doesn't harm CA. For larger gaps, I prefer to use bits of styrene sheets and strips as well as those plugs made from stretch sprues. Once the cement evaporates, I fill the edges where the kit plastic and the added styrene meet with superglue just to make sure I eliminate even the least noticeable seams. Occasionally I also use plastic goo, which is styrene dissolved in thin cement. The more styrene you add, the thicker the consistency of your goo will become. Once it completely dries out, it will give you an actual plastic surface to work with. On the downside, it's very aggressive and it can easily melt parts, so I always apply it very sparingly. The only actual putty I get out of the drawer from time to time is called green stuff. It's probably not the best choice to be used as filler for aircraft and armor models because it doesn't dry hard enough to sand, but it's great for making tarps and some other custom accessories. Green stuff can be easily shaped with moistened toothpicks and sculpting tools like these ones from AK Interactive. Come to think of it, I have 2 other types of putties I haven't even tested yet. The polyester one comes with a hardener and it's supposed to be similar to automotive body fillers, which would make it ideal to fix stain marks and ejector pin marks. Epoxy putty on the other hand should be somewhat similar to green stuff, but I imagine it dries harder and sands better. I'm sure many of you have already used these and maybe a bunch of other products as well, so feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments. And lastly, the cause of me falling out of love with filler putties. Like I explained earlier, we just didn't hit it off. The digital vernier caliper is probably the most convenient tool for simple measurements. This is one of those things I waited years to invest in, even though these plastic ones cost next to nothing. Let's say I want to know how high the side of the truck bed is. Boom, 7.4. We can use this little tail to measure depth. Boom, 5mm. You guessed it right, this only arrived last week and it immediately became my new favorite toy. Flexible rulers come in different shapes and sizes and they can guide markers and help measure stuff on cylindrical parts. I use fine line markers for precise marking and wide tip ones to add contrast to edges I want to thin down, like the trailing edge of this wing. I keep my thin masking tapes in a regular dispenser, otherwise they collect all the dust from the entire universe in less than a second. These tapes are made by Aizu and Tamiya and they are my go-to solution for precise marking when working with low tolerance. If I needed a line parallel to this panel line at a specific distance, this is how I would go about it. Flexible masking tapes can help do the same thing on curved surfaces. Once I'm done, I use isopropyl alcohol to wipe off the marks. For the sake of completeness, I also have a steel ruler lying around, but I use it mostly only as a straight edge to cut styrene and thin metal sheets. And lastly, I bought this steel square at a modeling show and I use it to align parts before gluing them together. For the longest time, I used this old needle in a pin vise and I used to be convinced that there was nothing that scribed plastic better. That was until I bought Mr. Scriber needle from MRP. It has a much finer and more durable tip than anything else I ever used. It has these 2 siblings that are also great, but I find myself using the red one 9 times out of 10. Scribing templates are great to add access panels and similar engraved details. Let's imagine that this poor skyhawk had a large rectangular panel right here. To engrave it, I would temporarily attach the matching template and trace it with multiple light passes, use almost no pressure and let the tip do the work. After a bit of cleanup, these panels can look as if they were always there. Self-adhesive Dymo embossing labels are great for straight edges to scribe along. To deepen and widen panel lines, I like to use this 3-edge scribing tool from Z63. For more heavy-duty applications like scoring this aluminum sheet, I use a tungsten carbide scriber. To be able to add rivet lines of various densities, I collected a bunch of rosy derivator wheels over the years, including 2 double wheels. Sadly, the gentleman who used to make these passed away a few years back, but I'll be forever grateful to him for these excellent tools. Since then, many alternatives have become available on the market. Galaxy Tools don't only make regular wheels, but also these special ones for corners, which I have to say also work very well. This set called Micro Rivet Punch from Trumpeter/Master Tools is great to imitate larger bolt and rivet heads. By the way, riveting wheels you can also build yourself. David, who runs the Plasmo channel, has a great tutorial on how to do that. You'll find the link in the description. I use a lot of styrene discs to stretch build stuff. I make them with this punch and die set from RP Tools. This one has a range between 0.5 and 2mm, but RP Tools have a similar solution for larger diameters as well. It's super easy to use. You just put the sheet between the base plate and the plexi, pick the punch with the diameter you need, insert it into the matching hole, twist the knobs on the sides, and then strike down with this little hammer that comes with the set. Then you can always move the sheet around and repeat this as many times as many discs you need. I have a somewhat less sophisticated set from UMM for larger discs. It works almost exactly the same way. And so does this set for hexagons, also from UMM. This one is great to imitate nuts and bolt heads. To bend wires, I mostly use generic combination and flathead bending pliers, but to make curves, I have these round nose ones from Heiko Wild. Rollmate 3 from UMM is a great tool to roll metal sheets. All I need to do is place a piece of metal sheet over one of these half cylindrical grooves and push down on the rod that comes with the set. Some metals tend to bounce back more than others, so in order to get the curvature right, sometimes I need to use a smaller diameter groove than the actual diameter I need. I hope that made sense. To fold mid-sized photo-etched parts, I use Meng's flat nose bending pliers. For significantly smaller and larger parts, I have this old photo-etched bender, most likely from UMM, but I'm not entirely sure about the brand. A single-edged blade is pretty much the only thing that can get in there to help fold these tiny parts. The other edge of the tool is ideal for bending longer photo-etched parts and metal sheets. And this, dear friends, concludes the overview of the tools I use to build models. As I said in the beginning, this was not at all meant to be a definitive list of equipment to fit everyone's needs. There are plenty of tools in this video that many modelers can achieve excellent results without. The opposite is also true. There are many things out there that I'd like to have but don't have yet. Even some very basic ones, like an actual modeling chisel set. What I'm trying to get to is that if you're relatively new to modeling, don't be intimidated by all this crap. Over time, you'll try different things and figure out what works and what doesn't work for you. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the channel's growing community. It is your continuous support and kind feedback that keeps me going. If you found this overview useful and haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing. Also, feel free to leave your comments down below. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I'll return to build videos now, but please let me know if you would like me to continue this series as well. Thanks for watching, take care, I hope to see you soon.